And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk outside of Spartan Stadium, Michigan State 2-0, ranked in the top 10 of the coaches poll now. But now they get a real challenge going out to Washington. Mel Tucker at his press conference today. No players. That'll happen on Tuesday. We'll talk with players and probably an assistant coach on Tuesday. But Washington is going to be a real challenge, Paul. And you could, everybody knew that would be the case. And Washington, by the way, is way better than they were last year. Last year is kind of coming to the end of the Jimmy Lake era. New coach this year, DeBoer, 2-0. They blew out Kent State. They blew out Portland State. They've not really been tested by great competition yet. But if you know football, you know it's going to be difficult. Secondly, if you know Mel Tucker, he seemed to have, in my opinion, had kind of ratcheted up the, I don't want to say intensity, but like a lot of work to do today, understanding that this opponent's going to require excellent preparation, excellent execution, and there was just a little bit more of an edge to him today. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's a difference of, I've been thinking about this the last couple of weeks. You know, you had two MAC teams to open up the season. Last year, it was no joke, straight out the gate, Northwestern. So you had that team's full focus in training camp. Everyone had something to prove. And, you know, this is a little bit different. You know, you got Michigan State being talked about as the top 10 team. Mel Tucker's always talked about being a great recruiter. Transfers, guys are getting Defensive Player of the Week, deservedly so. Last year, you know, like I remember even after that Northwestern game, we're standing there doing the VCast, and we're talking about, are these guys for real? How bad is Northwestern? Even after the Miami game, when you're thinking about that one, there's holes in this team. Last week Michigan State puts a hole in Akron. They didn't play great. And I think sometimes that happens when you play a bad team. They did some really good things. They made some progress in areas, but you kind of didn't have to generate intensity, generate focus, generate, the themes that Mel Tucker's doing this year, because it was right there for him. I mean, they went Northwestern and Miami, and it's different this year. You got two overmatched MAC opponents, and maybe Michigan State needed this, but this is the deal this week, and I feel like you get a handful every year of games that kind of determine the trajectory of your season, and sometimes a game like this can be one of them, sometimes it isn't. I think back in 2015, was that when Michigan State lost out in Oregon, or was that the year before? I think it was
2014.
2014.
It's the year after the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I think that team ended up creating its own trajectory because they really built off of even that tough loss where they didn't have a lot of depth there. They had new defensive linemen, and they kind of made their own luck, and they kind of made themselves into what they were for the next year. This is a little. So I felt like that team, that could have been like a turning point game, but it wasn't. To me, this feels like one that could be like a turning point game, but maybe it's not. We don't know. Michigan State plays a tough Washington opponent, and then they come home and they have to play a really tough Minnesota team. And you look around college football this past week, and you look at what happened to Notre Dame, and they played a tough game the week before, and they just didn't have it mentally against Marshall, and they lose two games. To me, this is like really time where they've got to kind of get focused and really get laser focused, because you have two really tough games.
Yes.
I know they're taking one at a time, but this has a chance to be like a two-game super positive or a two-game super negative.
Yes.
And unless the groundwork is laid this week, things can spiral really fast.
They could come out of it 4-0 and be a legit top 10 team, or they could be 2-2. 2 weeks from now.
It'd still be a good team, but a team that has to redefine its trajectory, a team that has to kind of pick up the pieces and kind of make kind of scramble. And I don't know. I have a feeling they're going to lose one of those two games, but I kind of felt like last year, them going down to Miami, that they were going to lose that game just because of all the circumstances. Mm-hmm. So what we don't know is, Mel Tucker didn't give specifics on their plan to deal with the West Coast, but I'm not sure that they're going to redefine the wheel by visiting the West Coast. Last year, I think what they did with nutrition and hydration and all that stuff, I think that was pretty cool. But this is a little bit different. Lots of teams go out to the West Coast. I'm not sure if there's a whole lot of new crazy things that you can do, to get yourself ready for that trip.
Mm-hmm. And it's a task. He acknowledged it is a task. Last year I thought they were going to beat Miami because watching Miami's on defense, they just didn't fit things right. I knew there were weaknesses there, but I didn't know how Michigan State was going to react to the weather and the heat and all those things. We were still learning about Michigan State. I knew that Miami was there to be had.
That's what I thought was what was going to happen to Michigan State at Miami was what happened to Michigan State when they played Arizona State. Remember they played 3 quarters of really good football, and then the fourth quarter caught up to them. That was a really hot night, and I thought the same thing would happen to Michigan State. Not that they weren't the better team or better prepared team, but that the conditions would catch up with them.
Yeah, this will be the third time they've gone out to the Pac-12 to the West Coast for a regular season game in the last, 15 years or so. It reminds me more of, was it D'Antonio's second year when we went out there and we watched them play California. Michigan State played Cal, a decent Cal team.
That team had some good players. I mean, look, you go back and look at that roster, I think there's maybe between 8 and 12 NFL players on there. And they were all at different stages of their development. But, Brock Vereen, the 2 tailbacks played in the NFL for more than 5 years. And they had linebackers that were really good. Quarterback was good, a scheme that was good, coaching that was good. So maybe there are some similarities between that team and the one Michigan State will play.
Yeah. The Arizona State game was interesting. Also, at that time, Michigan State was having all kinds of trouble on offense for 2 or 3 seasons and came up just short in that game and lost to Arizona State here as well. But going out to the West Coast, Michigan State doesn't do it very often, but they're not won out there in, 5-6 decades. And Big Ten teams historically have had trouble out there. And not only out there, Wisconsin was just upset by Washington State in Madison. So anyone that just thinks this is an automatic victory just doesn't know enough about college football. And nothing automatic about this. As far as Washington, I've not studied them yet, but I watched the Kent State game, skimmed through it here and there, watched some of it. You didn't have to watch very much to see that Michael Penix is a plus college quarterback. Drops back, reads the field, and delivers the ball. He is excellent when healthy, and the receivers are the real thing. This guy McMillan is averaging over 20 yards a catch, had an 84-yarder, and Giles Jackson, former Michigan player, little guy at 5'9", but he's legit. And then they've got a freshman. I think he's a freshman, but they've got three good receivers that will challenge you with a quarterback who knows what he's doing. And a new head coach that's given them some new energy. DeBoer worked with Penix at Indiana. That's why Penix went to Washington when DeBoer was coordinator at Indiana for a short time. They're going to be fired up. That's a loud stadium with a covered grandstand. It's been known as perhaps the loudest venue in the Pac-12 for years. And they're going to be very hungry to beat a Big Ten team with everything that's gone on this summer, among other things. So it's going to be a legitimate task and challenge for Michigan State, and they need to play better than they've been playing. Michigan State's blown out opponents, but they need to be sharper than that. Peyton Thorne needs to be sharper than that. I like Peyton Thorne a lot. A lot of people do, but based on the body of work this season, and even at the end of last season, Washington is going to have an edge at quarterback in this game, unless something changes. That's something that people need to wrap their heads around as they get ready as fans to watch this game.
Yeah, and I think all the talk off season, and we're to blame for this a little bit, but all the talk about, hey, you don't have Kenneth Walker III, can you carry this team? And I think you got to go back and look at football for what it is. And there are going to be times when Peyton Thorne or any quarterback has to put the team on his shoulders, and carry the team and make tough throws in tough situations. There aren't too many situations or too many quarterbacks that can carry a team that don't have, that doesn't have a running game. That, to me, Michigan State needs to keep on working and keep on cranking on that running game. And the offensive line. I mean, these guys, you got some veterans on the interior, and they had some really nice plays where they blocked those up really well. You've got less experience, at the tackle positions, but these guys need to continue to come together. Berger is a young running back. I thought about that a couple of times watching some of it. Some of his runs. I think of, because we're familiar with the name Berger for a long time because he played at Wisconsin a couple of years ago. You think of him as a veteran. He's really not. Broussard more so, but he's not he's kind of getting used to the way Michigan State runs the ball, or the way a Big Ten team runs the ball between the tackles and that type of thing. But that running game has to keep on coming along. Tight ends, I think they made some progress blocking. There's still some things that need to be cleaned up. But in a game like this, you can block up. If you're tight ends, you can block up most of your plays at a really high level, and all it takes is that one play. You don't block, all of a sudden that's an 8-yard loss, and then you're losing opportunities. That stadium with the offensive line, you just wonder how are they going to handle the noise. The two loudest stadiums. Well, there's 3 really great stadiums in that conference. Out at Utah, Autzen Stadium in Oregon and Washington. You can make an argument for any one of those three stadiums being the loudest in the Pac-12. But how is that young offensive line going to handle that? And how are these tailbacks going to handle that?
When I went back and I watched the Michigan State Akron game, I've gone through maybe half of it, and I think maybe I gave Akron a little bit too much credit. And that's why I don't like to do predictions and so forth. And I talked a little bit too much in the pre-snap read about the point spread, and Michigan State has a real good chance to cover this. I don't like doing that because then I'm worried about that prediction. That's why it's just not good to cover a game after you've done a prediction, because it might be hard for people to understand this, but for me personally and other people, you start getting too negative about why isn't Michigan State blowing this team out earlier.
Right.
And Akron did some good things earlier, but I didn't give enough credit to Michigan State, what they did on the ground in the first quarter. Michigan State came out, established the run after that first turnover, went down largely on the run, inside zone, nothing fancy, inside zone, and got some chunk yardage and did some good things to establish the run. Not only that drive, but on the second touchdown drive as well. Got down to the 1 yard line and kept punching in those 1 yard touchdowns. They messed up the fourth down play. Nobody was really beaten physically on that play. Akron had stemmed just before the snap, and I'd have to ask Kapilovic and some other people about it. But whether it was Hunt and Spencer Brown at right tackle, did they block down too much and let a guy come in free? They didn't seem to identify it on the same page the same way. That's my guess on that. Nobody was beaten, but I thought the whole game Samac did a good job on those goal line runs. On those goal line runs a few times, he was taking on a nose guard who's okay. They'll face a much better nose guard this weekend. But man up, the guy's two-gapping right here, and Samac 2 times got into him and just turned him. Real nice play by Samac going inside both of those times. Executed well. Horst in the starting lineup at left tackle was solid with his run blocking. So I thought, when they talk about a lot of progress needs to be made between week 1 and week 2, and I know Berger rushed for 120 in week number 1. But I thought the offensive line took a couple of steps in terms of physicality. Maybe that was a little bit skewed because Akron on the defensive front is not as good as Western Michigan's. So they faced a weaker opponent but had that improvement. So I think Michigan State is making progress in that run game you just mentioned. That's a good sign.
Yeah, and I think going back, I felt the same way, watching that. The thing that stood out to me is, like we were talking about in the VCast afterwards, about feeling like Michigan State was getting outplayed, by Akron.
Statistically, they were.
Statistically,
they were
but like when you rewatch it, the physicality aspect of it, even on some of the plays on defense, like guys were in position maybe to make plays, but didn't. But I think Broussard, I felt like in that that first scoring drive, he scored the first one, right? He scored the first touchdown.
Yeah.
I thought he ran inside really nicely. I thought it was blocked up really nicely, and I think that was the emphasis on the run blocking. You can see what they were working on. Now the thing is, this week is where is it going to go? But rewatching the game, I didn't feel like Michigan State was like getting was lucky to be up 14-0 at the end of the first quarter. And I think sometimes when you see a team move the ball on it, and then see quarterback inaccurate, those are the things that stand out. But rewatching it, Michigan State did some really good things on offense.
I agree from a physical.
And even from a Peyton Thorne thing, he's got to be better. But one thing I really think that needs to be pointed out, I think he does a nice job of getting them in to run plays. But the way he carries out the fakes, that's something a lot of quarterbacks don't do. And I thought he did a nice job in that game. So that's one of those those detail things. But when you carry out some of those fakes, that influences some of the defense, that really helps out your tailbacks. It was some of the running game stuff was good.
Yeah, it was. And one of those early running plays by Berger, it went for either like 13 or 18 yards. He changed the direction of the run play on that based on the front. So that's a good component that he has going for them. But yeah, the physicality for Michigan State was good in the run game. And I think Michigan State has an interesting thing going for it that I don't remember many teams doing. It'll be interesting to see if they keep doing this, and that is, when Broussard had a 1 yard touchdown run, it was Berger that carried the ball for the most part in that drive. Then they get inside the 10, the other guy comes in and finishes. Then the next drive, Broussard did a lot of carries, got inside the 10, Berger came in and finished it off. Now, on one hand, you're keeping guys happy getting their touchdowns, but from a conditioning standpoint, that's a positive. You're bringing a fresh guy in to finish a drive. That's a good component.
It reminded me like of the NFL, the way they use running backs now, and what drives people that play fantasy football crazy. Your guy can be going down the field getting a whole bunch of carries, and then a guy comes off the bench and scores a touchdown.
It makes perfect sense.
But that's kind of like, the NFL thing. I think the other thing too is getting Broussard down there in the goal line in that first drive and giving him a chance to finish it off. That's one of the things I think that he needs to do is it's going to help him for the next level if he's got that chance, is to, show that you can finish on the goal line. And and then you give Berger his touchdown that he would have gotten on the earlier drive. So it's a good deal. Guys stay fresh, and kudos to other guys like Eli Collins coming in. I just got to give him a shout out just because like a guy like him, he's just so unselfish. He's such a team oriented player. Does a great job on special teams for the most part. But for him to get an opportunity and then to go with it and to play as well as he did, and that also keeps the energy with the guys in front of them, because they know that if they're not bringing it, he's gonna push them.
And Akron had several nice medium-sized chunk plays in that first quarter, outgained Michigan State in the first quarter, and the quarterback Irons was 8 for 9, I think, at the end of the first quarter, and ended up 9 for 13. So I went back and looked at some of those plays, and to me they're less problematic than I thought at the time.
Agree too.
I didn't think corners were getting beat deep by MAC receivers or anything. They had a nice little game plan, with those quarterback counters. We talked about that in the VCast after the game. And when they started doing that, Michigan State started playing like a softer zone just to keep an eye on it. And to Akron's credit, when Michigan State played a softer, more reactive zone, they just hit little underneath routes, taking what was open there, and they turned those into a couple chunk plays. They had the little tight end play. They got upfield for like 20 yards or so, and that was the little trick mechanism, not really like a gadget play with flea flickers or anything, but the tight end came off, and it was a crack and go. I didn't see it against St. Francis. Maybe they did it last year. I don't know. But it's a new coach with Moorhead. He's blocking, he's run blocking, then he releases. It's a play you can do once. You can't do that like all game. You get used to it. But they had nice little gadgets. 20 yards, just little plays you can do once where people were not like beaten. Now, the one play where Kendall Brooks, like we're talking in the VCast, I haven't seen like a receiver turn him and take him deep. The one time they tried to, it was a tight end, Branks, who's I described him in the pre-snap read as like a Tyler Hunt type of guy. Maybe Tyler Hunt, but a little quicker. He was second team All-MAC last year, pretty good tight end. They faked a bubble on that play. So it was a bubble screen over here, so Brooks took a bite on the bubble, and the tight end was by him. Real nice play. Like, we're going to fake the bubble, and we're going to catch the safety, make an inexperienced safety, taking a false step, and we're going to release our tight end. So Brooks, so that was a nice play. He got a pass defense, did a real good job getting a pass defense on that. But false step there.
Is that the one you get the breakup on?
Yeah. Washington's going to see that. They're going to test him, but they're going to test him with more speed. But false step, his change of direction was really good. He flipped his hips and was quick out of it. His makeup speed was pretty good to get there and to catch up on it. His sideline to sideline speed on a couple of plays, there was a running back that turned the corner for 11. I'm talking about Kendall Brooks, was just kind of okay. As hard as he hits at 215 pounds, his top end speed is just okay for a safety. If he at 215 pounds, the way he hits, if he could also run like Henderson or some of these other guys, then you're talking NFL prospect. There's got to be something that's not great about him, and it's that straight line speed that it's going to be tested this week, but we've not seen it on film where someone's really gone after him.
He kind of reminds me of R.J. Williamson, when who was a really good safety, but he was a bigger hitter type, and he made some athletic plays in the middle of the field. He had good ball skills, but he wasn't an elite athlete.
Yeah.
And, he was like, I don't know, in today's game, maybe he ends up being a slot linebacker or something like that, but that's kind of what he reminds me of. Some of it's just a feel, too. He hasn't been out there a lot. We got to keep that in mind, given the ability level or the school that he transferred from. But, yeah, it's going to be a big deal, as it always is. I mean, when Michigan State has had really good defensive backs and they've gone up against Pac-12 receivers, there's always been an adjustment period.
Yeah.
I think even against Oregon and, you go back and look at the Arizona State game and you're like, oh, who's Brandon Ayuk? Well, he's a guy that's like, pretty good in the NFL. I mean,
Sure.
Some of these guys are big-time stretch of field type receivers. So it'll be really interesting to see what Michigan State is able to do there. I'm wondering, going into this game, is Brule a guy that's being ends up being used more in this.
He looked fast on Saturday again.
He does, and I like Van Summer, and I think he's done a really great job. But something in my mind just tells me that there's going to be times where Brule is a better option, and I wonder if this is one of those deals. I think you go back to like a Taiwan Jones, Chris Norman type of thing. Chris Norman, good linebacker. He pretty banged up, but there were times when they needed Taiwan Jones, who had more change of direction, more athleticism, and I wonder if this is one of those deals where they need Brule, because he's been in some of these moments, and it played some teams with some pretty good athletes, and I expect Brule to factor maybe bigger in this game than a lot of people will talk about ahead of time.
I agree. It's going to be a difficult challenge. As far as Jaden Reed goes, Mel Tucker's not going to give any information on injuries or so forth, but you probably saw the game. He slid out of bounds and his back hit the bleachers, and there was a laceration. Tucker won't give any information, but I'm kind of expecting Reed to be in there and playing. He walked out the field. His wheels are fine. I'm expecting Reed to be there, and they need him because they're going to need some explosiveness to match some of the explosiveness that Washington's going to present.
Yeah, he's got the toughness of those 1980s, early 1990s, or mid 90s type, Michigan State receivers, where they unless you had to wheel them out in a wheelchair, they just probably kick the wheelchair over. Guys like Derek Mason. I said Derek Coleman last time I mentioned this, and I felt dumb afterwards. But Derek Mason, Muhsin Muhammad types, like Najee Carter types, this is one of those games where, for Jaden Reed, you came back to Michigan State, to increase your NFL stock. I think these out of conference games against, he'll see some good defensive backs, and there'll be good visibility for him. I think he'll be out there. He played. In my opinion, he played through far worse last year at times, and he's one of the toughest. He's one of the toughest dudes on the team. When you see him spill a linebacker, or take that on and willingly take that on and drop a linebacker, that tells you all you need to know about Jaden Reed. And he's got a big heart, and I expect him to play. And I do feel like Jaden Reed is. Peyton Thorne went to him probably maybe too much at times in the past, but he's the guy that is like the kind of therapy animal. Like everybody's got to have that safety blanket, and Jaden Reed is that guy. And I think you got to have him out there so Peyton Thorne can kind of go to him if he wants to or if he needs to, and it's a calming effect on the entire offense. And he looked fast last week, and
yes.
That punt return, man. Like Mel Tucker was asked about that today, but that was like one of the best punt returns, because usually it wasn't a terrible punt, right? And it wasn't one of those like low, really worm burner type punts where you're just like it's all discombobulated. That was like a foot in the ground, get your butt moving upfield and doing it at a fast rate of speed. And Michigan State needs that explosive version of Jaden Reed out there for any chance, in my opinion, to beat Washington. Now I think they can do it without him if they had to, possibly. Because there's good athletes. Keon Coleman needs to take a step. There's other guys out there that can make plays, but Jaden Reed is the one that you just know, just like in the bowl game, that he's going to make the 50-50 plays that have to be made, and that's a real reassuring presence for Peyton Thorne.
He's a guy that can make a difference in this game, and Michigan State needs him out there. I expect that he will be out there. So you combine Derek Mason and Mill Coleman, maybe it might have been in the back of your head, and you get Derek Coleman. You get a Syracuse basketball player.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that all the time. I called Benny Fowler Benny Cunningham for like 3 years.
Well, and we have an intern, and you mentioned Kendall Davis, and it was Kendall Brooks, and I explained it to him in the press box. I'm like, Kendall Davis played about 15 years ago. I'm like,
I wrote Kendall Davis in a story after the game, and I had to go back and change it. So I was going to warn people. The older you get, the more it happens, because there's more names and players you've covered. But I've called Malik Hall a few times. I've called Malik Hall. It'll happen again. I'll call him Kendall Davis, because there was Kendall Brooks and Kendall. But it's Kendall, actually. Anyway, I'm doing my best over here. Konyndyk said his best all the time. Anything else, Paul?
Yeah. I'm just wondering about this D-line. I think this is one of those games where Michigan State, we talked a lot about the D-line. This is a game where the interior defensive line has to and I don't know what the availability is if some guys are out. That the availability of a guy like Jacob Slade, and Tucker doesn't talk about injuries, but if you have your full complement of defensive linemen and they're playing at a high level, Simeon Barrow, Jacob Slade, I'd feel a lot better about this game, because I think those guys give you something extra, and then it also, it's just more of a tighter rush. I do like what Derek Harmon's doing. Going back and watching, he had that one play. Akron players are complaining about being late hit out of bounds or whatever like that. But that, to me, is impressive when a guy that's 320 pounds can run as far as that and go make a play on the sideline. That tells you all you need to know about his heart, and I think that bodes well for the future. Maverick Hansen, I like some of the things that he does, but you want Slade and Barrow because those guys can be disruptive. The experience, the steadiness of a Slade, the disruptiveness of a Barrow. Because if you can do some of those kind of funky kind of twists and stuff like that with Barrow, that adds another element.
Yeah, they need those two guys to be at their best. And both those guys have been banged up a little bit. Barrow did not start this game against Akron, but he came in and played some downs, which is good. That he's not totally on the shelf. Derek Harmon got his first career start, was all right, but you're right. Those guys, they all need to come to play because it's going to be a big challenge.
Angelo Grossa, this is going to be his. This is going to be a big test for him.
If you're Washington and you've got a quarterback like that and receivers like they have, you're looking at Michigan State's safeties, and they're question marks. They've been so far so good against who they've played. But now it's going to go up a level, and we'll see what they've got back there. Safety at Michigan State. It's going to be a determining factor.
And then you just wonder, too, sometimes we've seen Penix at his best against Michigan State.
Sure.
And there's some guys that play well against some teams. We all know that.
I still can't believe this guy Petrus, the quarterback for Iowa. I saw him before Michigan State played out there 2 years ago. I'm like, this guy is not good. He went against Michigan State that won 49-7, and he was really solid that day. I'm like, where'd this guy come from? And after that game, the rest of his career, he's been back to being what I thought he was, but not against Michigan State on that day.
Right. And there's other guys. I think Graham Mertz has probably had a day against Michigan State, the guy from Wisconsin that's not very, that's had a pretty up and down career when there's no run game. He's the guy that has a real hard time carrying the team with his arm. But there's been, that's why I said that's why I did my 3-2-1 last week. One of the points I made is, Michigan State dominated a bad team, but we've seen bad teams move the ball on this Michigan State defense. So it feels like things are tied together better. It feels like guys are, when the ball's in the air, you see a lot of Michigan State players making plays. No one's getting beat deep. There's not like those half dozen times where you lean over to me and say, man, if that quarterback was more accurate, that would have been 6 points right there. There hasn't been those. There's been guys in the position to make plays.
Yes.
And I think it helps having Chuck Brantley healthy and back. Chester Kimbrough is a much better player than he was last year. Even like a Marquis Lowry, having that guy come in as a backup, or Ronald Williams, all these guys, there's no serious major drop off where guys are getting really, really beat. Now we don't know about safety because that's where the corner's okay. Safety is the real depth position, and I don't know if Jaden Mangum is up for this. I don't know if they're going to try some different things to protect him. Maybe some corners back there. Is Ronald Williams playing a deep a little bit? I don't know, but this will be a big litmus test, and either Michigan State is going to celebrate a huge win, or they're going to get a really good idea of what they need to work on, and that's okay in college basketball because you have the NCAA tournament. In college football, it's not so okay because it seems like everything is in damage control after that.
It leaves a mark. When you lose, it leaves a mark. Basketball, not so much. You can get over it. And, we're going to find out about Michigan State's athleticism back there at the safety position, and we'll know more about the team. But if Michigan State does win this game, we'll see what Washington looks like. But if Michigan State wins, people need to realize it was a big win. And I'm not sure if they will or not. Then they'll have to back it up against Minnesota, which is going to be a real test because Minnesota's really rolling. They're the favorite to win the Big Ten West now. And next 2 weeks, Michigan State up against it. And Tucker, these guys are hard at work.
You're going to find out 1 week if you can defend the pass. The next week, you're going to find out if you can defend the run. Two different types of animals. Minnesota's got a great running scheme they have going all the way back to Western Michigan when P.J. Fleck was there. They do a really nice job running the football. Great personnel, good blocking and stuff like that. And this week, it's can they defend vertically? Right.
All right. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. Been watching the VCast for SpartanMag.com.